The year was 1941, a year that would forever change the course of history. The world watched in horror as Europe was engulfed in the flames of World War II. Cities were reduced to rubble, and millions of lives were lost in the relentless conflict that spread across the continent. Across the globe, tensions simmered in the Pacific. The vast ocean became a stage for a brewing conflict that would soon erupt into full-scale war. Japan, a burgeoning military power with ambitions of empire, sought to expand its influence across Asia. The nation had been building its military might, showcasing its strength in grand parades and strategic maneuvers. Standing in its path was the United States, a sleeping giant hesitant to join another global conflict. The American public, scarred by the memories of World War I, was largely isolationist, wary of entangling alliances and foreign wars. For years, Japan had been steadily expanding its control in the Pacific, clashing with China and eyeing resource-rich territories held by European powers. The Japanese military's aggressive campaigns in Manchuria and China were clear indicators of their expansionist ambitions. The United States, wary of Japan's growing aggression, responded with economic sanctions, aiming to curb Japan's ambitions. These sanctions targeted vital resources like oil and steel, which were crucial for Japan's war machine. These sanctions, however, had the opposite effect, fueling resentment and pushing Japan towards a desperate gamble. Japanese military leaders, feeling cornered and believing war with the United States inevitable, began to plan a bold and audacious move. Japanese military leaders, believing war with the United States inevitable, planned a surprise attack. They meticulously strategized, aiming to deliver a crippling blow that would give Japan the upper hand in the Pacific. Their target, Pearl Harbor, the US Navy's Pacific Fleet headquarters in Hawaii. This strategic location was home to a significant portion of the American naval power in the Pacific. The attack, they believed, would cripple American naval power, paving the way for Japan's conquest of Southeast Asia. The meticulously planned assault aimed to neutralize the US Pacific Fleet, giving Japan free rein to expand its empire. On December 7, 1941, Japanese aircraft descended upon Pearl Harbor, unleashing a storm of fire and steel. The surprise attack caught the American forces off guard, resulting in devastating losses. The American Pacific Fleet was devastated, and the United States was thrust into the fires of World War II. The attack on Pearl Harbor marked a turning point, galvanizing the American public and government to fully commit to the war effort. The Pacific War had begun. The United States, now fully engaged, would embark on a grueling and relentless campaign across the Pacific, facing fierce resistance from Japanese forces. The battles that followed would be some of the most intense and brutal of the entire war, shaping the future of the Pacific region and the world. The morning of December 7th dawned bright and clear over Pearl Harbor. The sun rose over the tranquil waters, casting a golden hue over the naval base. It seemed like any other day, with sailors and soldiers going about their routines, unaware of the impending disaster. The American base, home to the Pacific Fleet, bustled with activity. Ships were being prepared, maintenance was underway, and the personnel were engaged in their daily tasks. The air was filled with the sounds of engines, footsteps, and the occasional laughter of comrades. Unbeknownst to the sailors and soldiers stationed there, a Japanese strike force was approaching, poised to launch a surprise attack. The fleet, consisting of 6 aircraft carriers, had traveled across the Pacific Ocean under strict radio silence to maintain the element of surprise. At 7:55 a.m. local time, Japanese planes filled the sky. The first wave of 183 aircraft, including bombers, torpedo planes, and fighters, descended upon Pearl Harbor with precision and deadly intent. Waves of bombers and fighters descended upon the unsuspecting base, targeting battleships, airfields, and other vital installations. The roar of engines and the whistling of bombs filled the air, creating a cacophony of destruction. The attack was swift and brutal. Within minutes, explosions rocked the harbor and plumes of smoke rose into the sky. The chaos was overwhelming as sailors and soldiers scrambled to respond to the sudden onslaught. American ships caught unprepared were sitting ducks. The Japanese pilots expertly targeted the battleships moored in the harbor, delivering devastating blows that left the vessels crippled and burning. The USS Arizona, struck by an armor-piercing bomb, exploded in a fiery inferno, sinking with over 1,000 men trapped inside. The ship's destruction was one of the most tragic moments of the attack, symbolizing the immense loss of life. Other battleships, including the Oklahoma, West Virginia, and California, were heavily damaged or sunk. The Oklahoma capsized, trapping hundreds of men inside, while the West Virginia and California were left burning and listing. The attack on Pearl Harbor was a devastating blow to the U.S. Pacific Fleet. The once mighty fleet lay in ruins, with ships destroyed, aircraft obliterated, and the harbor itself a scene of utter devastation. 4 battleships were sunk and 4 more were heavily damaged. The loss of these ships significantly weakened the U.S. Navy's ability to project power in the Pacific. Over 2,400 Americans were killed and nearly 1,200 were wounded. The human cost of the attack was staggering, with families across the nation mourning the loss of their loved ones. The attack on Pearl Harbor shocked the nation and galvanized the American public. News of the attack spread rapidly, and the country was united in its resolve to respond to the aggression. President Franklin D. Roosevelt famously declared December 7th a date which will live in infamy. His speech to Congress was a rallying cry, urging the nation to come together and support the war effort. The next day, the United States declared war on Japan, officially entering World War II. The attack on Pearl Harbor marked a turning point in history, leading to America's full-scale involvement in the global conflict. In the wake of Pearl Harbor, Japan enjoyed a string of victories in the Pacific, seizing control of the Philippines, Guam, and other strategic islands. Their advance seemed unstoppable, but the tide was about to turn. In June 1942, 6 months after Pearl Harbor, the two navies clashed in a decisive battle near the tiny island of Midway. The Battle of Midway would prove to be a turning point in the Pacific War. American codebreakers had intercepted Japanese communications, giving the advance warning of the attack, and allowing Admiral Chester Nimitz to set a trap for the Japanese fleet. The ensuing battle was a disaster for Japan. American dive bombers, launching from carriers hidden beyond the horizon, crippled 4 Japanese aircraft carriers, the heart of their fleet. The loss of these carriers was a devastating blow from which the Japanese Navy would never fully recover. The Battle of Midway marked a turning point in the Pacific War. Japan's advance was halted and the initiative shifted to the Allies. From this point forward, the United States would be on the offensive, slowly but surely pushing Japan back towards its home islands. Section 4. Island Hopping, the Road to Japan. After the victory at Midway, the United States adopted a strategy known as island hopping. This strategy involved bypassing heavily defended Japanese islands and instead focusing on capturing smaller, strategically important islands. These islands would then be used as bases to launch further attacks and cut off Japanese supply lines. The island hopping campaign was a long and arduous process. Each island was fiercely defended by Japanese troops, who fought with tenacity and determination. Battles were often brutal and costly, with heavy casualties on both sides. One by one, however, American forces captured key islands, including Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Saipan, and Iwo Jima. Each victory brought the Allies closer to Japan, tightening the noose around the Japanese home islands. Section 5. A grueling struggle, the Battle of Guadalcanal. The Battle of Guadalcanal, fought from August 1942 to February 1943, was the first major offensive launched by the United States in the Pacific War. This battle marked a significant shift in the momentum of the war, as it was the first time the Allies went on the offensive against the Japanese forces aiming to halt their expansion in the Pacific. The battle, fought over the strategically important island of Guadalcanal in the Solomon Islands, was a grueling 6-month struggle that tested the resolve of both sides. The island's location was crucial, as it provided a base for controlling sea routes between the United States, Australia, and New Zealand, making it a key target for both the Allies and the Japanese. American Marines landed on Guadalcanal on August 7, 1942, capturing a Japanese airfield under construction. This airfield, later named Henderson Field, became a focal point of the battle. as both sides recognized its strategic importance for launching air operations in the region. The Japanese, determined to retake the island, launched a series of counterattacks both on land and at sea. These counterattacks were relentless and included fierce ground assaults, naval engagements and air raids, all aimed at dislodging the American forces from their positions. The fighting was fierce and unforgiving, with both sides enduring heavy casualties. The dense jungle terrain made combat even more brutal, as soldiers had to contend with not only the enemy, but also the harsh environment, which included sweltering heat, torrential rains, and dangerous wildlife. The Battle for Guadalcanal raged on land, in the air, and at sea. Each domain presented its own set of challenges, with ground troops engaging in close-quarters combat, pilots engaging in deadly dogfights, and naval forces clashing in intense sea battles. American and Japanese warships clashed in a series of nighttime naval battles, while planes from both sides dueled for control of the skies. These nighttime engagements were particularly perilous, as the cover of darkness added an element of unpredictability and danger to the already chaotic battles. The jungle environment added to the misery, with disease and exhaustion taking a heavy toll on both sides. Malaria, dysentery, and other tropical diseases were rampant, weakening the soldiers and complicating their efforts to fight effectively. After months of brutal fighting, the Japanese, facing mounting losses and dwindling supplies, were forced to evacuate Guadalcanal in February 1943. The evacuation marked the end of one of the most grueling campaigns of the Pacific War, as the Japanese High Command recognized that they could no longer sustain their efforts on the island. The American victory marked a turning point in the Pacific War, demonstrating that the Japanese were not invincible and could be defeated. This victory boosted the morale of the Allied forces and set the stage for further offensives in the Pacific, ultimately leading to the eventual defeat of Japan and the end of World War II in the Pacific theater.